Welcome to Alligator Preserves, everyone. I am your host, Laurel McHargue, back with an old friend of mine. You may remember his name, Keith Steinbaum, who has a new book out. Keith, welcome back to Alligator Preserves.
Laurel, it's nice to be back with you again. Thank you.
Can you believe that I think it's been over 5 years ago, I first interviewed you on your book, You Say Goodbye. Now, I understand there's a new cover
Yes.
for this right now, but You Say Goodbye is a story that was inspired by the Beatles song. It's a murder mystery. I learned about this young girl, Alex, who had a lemonade stand, and it turned into Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation, which, by the way, has profited over $300 million for childhood cancer research. After this young girl died, you found her name in an obituary. I mean, you get your information from so many amazing places. You had incredible characters here that grew. You didn't even know who done it. I remember that question that I asked you, like, did you know who done it when you were first writing it? And you didn't until you kind of got to the end.
Mhm.
And the Poe Consequence came out. You're a big Edgar Allan Poe fan. Um, tell us, tell our audience a little bit more about you in the past 5 years.
Well, we all had the COVID, the lockdown, so we spent a lot of times at our homes. And this was that period of time, I guess, allowed me to try to come up with a new idea for a book. But unfortunately, I was having trouble coming up with something until I spoke with, at the time, my 97-year-old mother, who is now 99. And she told me a story about my grandfather that blew my mind. And it was something I couldn't get out of my head. I had never heard the story before. Everyone in my family says, "Oh, sure, you've heard that. Didn't you know? Didn't you know?" No, I didn't know. And it was an amazing story that I thought about a lot. And it started an idea in my head. And I said to myself, I have something here and I need to pursue it, which I did.
Well, you tease us with it in the book that we're going to talk about today, In Lieu of Flowers. You mentioned something remarkable that happened to your grandfather back in the 1800s, I think. And so you
Yeah.
tease us with that, but you never explain it in here. And so uh, is that story what brought you back to writing?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Okay.
I wish I could come up with ideas as quickly as other people do with a list of 10 different stories that they're going to be writing. I wish I was able to do that. I'm not. But sometimes life grabs you by the collar and says, you have to do something, you have to say something, do it. And this was one of those situations.
So you have to tell us what happened to your grandfather back in the 1800s.
In 1898, my grandfather, who was born in Bucharest, Romania, he was an infant at the time. And it turns out that his mother, my great grandmother,
Mhm.
was the midwife for the local Roma community there. Um, and at that time in those areas, there were baby thefts that did occur. And my grandfather was actually one of those who was stolen from my grandmother. Fortunately, somewhere along the line, someone in the Roma community recognized my grandfather as the baby of the midwife. And they said, you can't take that baby. That's the midwife's baby. And this is the story that my mother told me. And I thought to myself, well, if someone in that Roma community who spotted my grandfather had turned left instead of right, or bent down to tie their shoe and didn't see the baby carriage being rolled past them, I wouldn't be here with you today, Laurel. We would not be having this interview. My family wouldn't exist, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, you can go all the way down the line.
Yeah.
And this is why I couldn't get out of my head, because I'm thinking this actually was a consequential thing for my own existence and my family's existence. And I couldn't get the idea out of my head. And I said, I have to do something. I have to do something with this idea. I have to do something with this story. And that
And yeah,
is how it started.
yeah, and you did because it opens with this, oh, so stressful, suspenseful. What's going to happen? Are they going to get away with it? Oh my goodness, it's wonderful. I mean, yeah, the idea of a baby being kidnapped uh, is always horrifying, and yeah, I just had to know what was going to happen with it. And again, you go to weird places, don't you? Yeah.
Well, maybe that says something about me.
Yeah. Well, no, I mean, I understand that because again, I think you know that my short stories go strange and dark and bizarre too, and I'm not typically that kind of person. But anyway, no, I get it. So, in addition to what you've already written in this new book, you have been a song lyricist. Are you still writing songs?
No, that was another lifetime ago. Although, as you know, in my book, You Say Goodbye, the protagonist is an ex-rock and roll star, and there's parts of the book where experiences happen to him, and he's reminded of lyrics that he wrote in songs that he had written in the past. So those lyrics that the protagonist thinks about are lyrics that I wrote. So I'll always feel I'm capable of writing a good lyric, but I don't pursue that anymore.
Okay. All right. Well, it's still not too late. There's still time. And, obviously you're going to get another inspiration one of these days and you're going to write a hit song. I just know it. I can feel it in my bones. Um, so back in the day, last time I spoke with you, you said that you were a Sunday writer. You kind of had to be a Sunday writer because you were, working and landscaping and doing all kinds of stuff. Um, were you how has your writing process changed with In Lieu of Flowers, or has it? Are you still a Sunday writer?
Well, the biggest word that I can give you that has changed everything is the word retired. I'm very
Ah,
happy to say that I sold my company in February of 2020, which, by the way, was a month before COVID came on strong. So my timing could not have been better.
wow,
Um,
wow.
and when I wrote You Say Goodbye, at the time I was very busy with work. And Monday through Friday, I was either had no time for it or I didn't have the energy for it. Saturday was a day which I kind of let myself go and just enjoy life and time with my wife and hanging out with my friends, doing things. So Sunday seemed to be the one day of the week that I could actually just sit in my backyard with my dog at my feet and work on my story. And fortunately, I was able to pick up where I left off each Sunday. It's not that I didn't think about the story through the week, but I was not able to write. I Unlike the Poe consequence, which I had a lot more time, and I spent all 24 hours a day. There were times of which I was up writing. So that was whole different situation.
Well, congratulations on selling your company and retiring. It must feel absolutely wonderful. And you're coming to us still from California, yes?
Yeah, I live in Los Angeles. Yes.
All righty. Well, I would like our listeners to have a feel for your writing in lieu of flowers. Would you read a passage from it?
I would love to. Thank you.
All
Just
right.
give
Set
me a
us
minute.
up.
Give me a minute to reach my book here.
All right.
Okay, just as a setup, the book, as you know, because you read it, the book has three parts. The first part takes place in 1920 Bucharest. Then it moves forward into a scene from World War II, which was actually based on a true bombing mission. It's called Operation Tidal Wave,
Mhm.
which British and American bombers teamed up to fly over the oil fields of Romania from Libya. They left Benghazi for the purpose of bombing the oil fields, which at the time had the nickname of Hitler's gas station, because it was Romania provided at least 1/3 of the Nazi oil. So this was a big, big deal. Um, and the character, I'm not really giving too much away here. The baby that was almost stolen in the first part of the book winds up, they wind up moving to America, and he's an American citizen, and he's a bombardier, is part of the crew for one of these planes that's going to be flying over Romania. Well, um, it is a supernatural book, and there are some scary things that happen along the way. And his name in Romania was Petra. And when he moved to America, he was changed to Peter. And Peter has a nightmare the night before the bombing mission. And it's not just a normal nightmare, it's a sign of things to come that you understand from the first part of the book in Romania, and something that's going to happen and be consequential in the future, because the final third of the book takes place in 2017 Los Angeles, especially specifically an area cemetery in Boyle Heights, which is a suburb of Los Angeles, called Evergreen Cemetery. So what I'm about to read you is a passage of that nightmare that Peter Levy has the night before the bombing mission.
Okay.
The telltale sounds of restlessness. Oh, but so Peter is in the barracks with everyone else who's going to be on the bombing mission, and it's a restless night. Of course, people are not sleeping well,
Right.
and so he's in his bed, and this is where the scene takes place. The telltale sounds of restlessness, reflected by the constant stirring and occasional coughs, permeated the darkness. Peter conceded any sleep at all as an improbability. At some point before dawn, however, he did fall asleep, and when he awoke, shaken by the detailed recollection of his dream, he wished he hadn't slept at all. As the visibility of the ceiling started coming into view, Peter propped himself up in bed, still haunted by the images of his nightmare about the flight. And this is the nightmare. The tremoring body of the B-24 continued navigating deeper into the darkening, smoke-filled sky as the cacophony of exploding enemy bombs neared their target by ever-decreasing distances. From the open window of his waist gunner position, Peter spotted the Messerschmitt fighter plane approaching from the east in a direct line toward where he stood. With his finger wrapped tightly around the trigger, Peter started spraying multiple rounds in rapid succession. The plane kept coming, continuing his approach as if specifically zeroing in toward Peter himself. And as he watched the ineffectiveness of his bullets bounce off the all-metal body and window of the closed canopy, the German's plane angled away, disappearing for several seconds before coming back around into a sudden side-by-side position with the B-24. Staring in equal parts confusion and disbelief, Peter stopped firing and gaped into the cockpit at a helmetless, bald-headed man with black, maniacal eyes pointing at him and laughing. His demonic expression seemed almost inhuman, as something that can only be described as wolfish in appearance. Within moments, the Messerschmitt vanished, leaving no trace of its existence. Peter remained immobile, shocked at witnessing the impossible. As the reality of the here and now returned to his consciousness, he turned around in terror as fire started spreading throughout the inside of the plane. Scrambling for his parachute, he heard the screams of his fellow airmen. Hurrying to ready his jacket for escape, with everything now in place to jump, he looked up and saw the others standing motionless together before him, without parachutes and their faces down, leaving Peter a view of nothing but the top of their headgear. "Come on," he yelled. "Let's go, let's go." In a slow, simultaneous lifting of their heads, his fellow crew members looked toward Peter. Each of their bone-white faces now resembled the Messerschmitt fighter pilot, their crazed expressions accentuated by the same diabolical black, empty caves for eyes. As their heads reared back in demented laughter, Peter heard more screams. This time, they were coming from him.
Yeah, I've had nightmares. Have you had nightmares?
Fortunately, not for a long time.
Oh man. Before he flew in this story, he writes letters. There's letter writing took on a crucial importance. Why did you include that, the idea of letter writing?
It gave me a chance to introduce his family life and his relationship with his mother, his father, and unfortunately, the sister who he never knew who died at birth. So that was important for the reader to have that background and understand that relationship.
Okay. And just even the idea, when I read that line, I felt a little bit of a pang, because who writes letters anymore? Right.
Well, yeah, this was 1943. And of course, when you know, I say this in the story, look, fortunately, I never had to fight in a war, but it doesn't take a veteran to know that if you're going to be flying a bombing mission, you may not come back.
Right.
And what else do you want to do but at least express your final thoughts to your loved one, whoever that happens to be? And of course, he wasn't able to tell his mother for security purposes what they were about to do the next day. But that's something that was very, very important. And it's obviously still continues to be for anyone in war, I would think, is to write your loved ones, because unfortunately, you never know if that day is going to be your final day. And they used to call the B-24 bombers back in those days flying coffins, because most of them did not come back.
Mm.
And in the real bombing mission, Operation Tidal Wave, that's what happened. Most of them did not come back. And I mentioned that at the very end of the book as a post note to it.
As a note, right? The character Peter, evolves, yes, in very interesting ways. Um, you talk about in Jewish mysticism, the number 74 represents the absence of light, the
Correct.
emergence of darkness. And that has something to do with this character, Peter.
Mhm.
How did you find that little detail, that number 74, which plays in the story?
I researched things. The time frame of it, because my grandfather was a World War I veteran, had I been able to do something back from that time period, I would have taken that World War I period of time. However, um, because I wanted it to be wind up in modern day Los Angeles, I had to use a time frame in which it made more sense for Peter to be a World War II veteran, not a World War I veteran.
Okay.
And the number 74, just through research, I decided to see, I wonder if there's any numbers because I didn't know this, and I'm Jewish, but I did not know that there are numbers in the Jewish religion that do mean things.
Mm-hmm.
And when I found out that 74 is the absence of light, well, having a supernatural story like I did, I said, this is perfect. This is perfect. I'm going to use this number and have 74 years later, after Peter's death, that's when this is going to take place in Evergreen Cemetery, where there
There
is
are messages.
yes, where the dead come back to life, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, yeah. Again, that fascinated me. Again, numerology, numbers, they're all through the Bible. I mean, so many things have deeper meanings than just, 1, 2, 3, ABC, right? So you have, again, fascinating characters in this story. Two that come to mind are your characters, Dragonfly and Hummingbird. Tell our listeners about those two characters, where you found them and how they play in the story.
Years ago, the Los Angeles Times had an article on a homeless couple. They did a special on them, and they weren't married; they were just friends. Then they were very, very close. Lived in the same tent, defended each other, protected each other, had each other's back. A woman and a man, and it was a great story. And again, as you know, Laurel, I look for story ideas.
Yeah.
And for example, with You Say Goodbye, I found about Alexandra Scott from
Yeah.
Alex's Lemonade Stand Foundation. I found her through the obituary section in the Times. So sometimes you come across these everyday stories that are very interesting and fascinating and give you ideas. Well, I wound up cutting out that newspaper article and saving it. And I had it for 2, 3, 4 years in my cabinet. I didn't do anything with it, but I always thought to myself that they would somehow make a good story. And I was going to write an entire story about maybe these two find something, an occurrence, a supernatural occurrence, or a mystery, and they wind up trying to decide how they're going to figure this out, how to tell people. Maybe they figure
Yeah.
something out themselves. That was going to be an idea. It never came to fruition. However, when I wrote this story, I thought to myself, this would be a good story to have two homeless characters as let's call it co-stars of the book.
Mm-hmm.
And so there, and the real the homeless people that were in the LA Times, they did have nicknames. I don't remember them, but they did have nicknames. So I thought to myself, well, yeah, I'm definitely going to give these two nicknames. So bringing that back to your question, let's start with Dragonfly. Unfortunately, my sister-in-law years ago, she died from breast cancer, and her name was Dixie. And Dixie had a real love of of dragonflies.
Yeah.
And my niece and my nephew and even my brother-in-law to this day, when they see dragonflies, they'll always say hi, Dixie. They always feel like Dixie's looking after them whenever they see a dragonfly. Well, in my backyard, especially during COVID, when I was, stuck in the backyard a lot, I would see birds. We have a lot of hummingbirds,
Mhm.
but there are some dragonflies that are constantly, especially in the summertime, zooming around. And it struck me that Dragonfly and would be a great nickname in honor of Dixie for a homeless character. And what's very cool about the comparison between a dragonfly and a hummingbird is that they're both very, even though they look completely different, they're both very similar in what they do. It's almost like I'd like to see them have a race to see who would win because they both are so fast and they stop on a dime, they soar, they zoom, they cut to the left, cut to the right, go up and down and up and down. They're fascinating. And so there it was. It made sense that, okay, let's put these two together and have dragonfly and hummingbird. Now, even though Dragonfly was in honor of Dixie, I did make Dragonfly the male, the man, and Hummingbird the woman, and that's how I came up with the characters of Dragonfly and Hummingbird.
And again, they're fascinating characters. They're witnesses in a way, right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah,
Yeah. I love that. And I love the fact that you found that in a story years ago, but you didn't know what you were going to do with it. um, as authors, we get our inspiration. A lot of people ask, "Where'd you get your inspiration from?" Right? That's a common question. And with mine, it's dreams and it's things that I see. Right? I
right.
mean, my dad loves dragonflies too, and there was a dragonfly flying over the front of my paddleboard once, and I decided, well, I have to have a dragonfly too, an actual dragonfly in my water white series. And it's like, well, how do you make it different? Well, you make it enormous in a fire breathing dragonfly. That's what I did with my dragonfly. But anyway, yeah,
Good.
we get our ideas from all kinds of things, which is
Yeah,
yeah.
it's funny you say that, Laurel, because you and I discussed this earlier. I'm generally a happy guy. I live a blessed life and love a family, and I've got my health, and but there are parts of me that just there is a darkness there that has always been my motivating factor in writing. I admit it, and it's just something that I deal with, and that's just the way it is. And so when you say we look for inspiration, well, if you read your daily newspaper or you watch the daily news, there's more quote unquote inspiration than I know what to do with. And what happens is it kind of builds up inside of me. And even though I told you this story about my grandfather when he was stolen as an infant in Bucharest, I had to write a story. And it's no surprise that I wound up finding reasons to inspire me that are not so happy. And so this was one of those situations.
Yeah, you talk about the darkness, and again, you're a fan of Edgar Allan Poe, and it really comes out in all of your work. There was a line in Lieu of Flowers where they're talking about evil, right? And maybe evil wins out because God is overwhelmed. Tell me a little bit about that. How'd that come up?
Look, you know, there's people of deep faith. There's people of agnostics who aren't necessarily believing in that special power. Um, it really doesn't matter. But the fact is that in my belief that um, people of faith, it's wonderful to have that, and you feel that support system and that strength, and that's envious to me. I envy that. But that being said, if you depend too much on on that on that on that um, on that power getting you out of your own problems and getting you out of trouble, and or that everything's going to be okay at the end, I don't feel that's necessarily a truism. And
Mm.
so when I say overwhelmed, I just feel that maybe mankind in the past, present, and future maybe depends too much on that. And again, I don't mean to get preach. Gosh, I do not want to get preach. I'm the last person to preach to anybody. But
But yeah,
that's where that comes from.
yeah. I mean, the idea that you think of every living person on the planet, you know, praying for better skin, more money, more whatever. Every single day, like countless, countless, countless prayers go out to whomever. And yeah, God is overwhelmed. That was an amazing line in there. You have a sleepover scene. Well, memories of a sleepover scene. Your character Michael is remembering a sleepover, and it's so specific, the smells and the things done and all. And I'm wondering if part of that was autobiographic.
Absolutely, Laurel. It's absolutely true. In fact, I was with my cousin Laura a couple days ago, and she read the book, and she pointed that out. She knew it. Yes, the answer is absolutely yes. I would as a kid, my grandpa and my grandma, they lived on a street in Los Angeles called Normandy Avenue, and I mentioned that in the book too. That's where they live. So I mentioned Normandy as the place where Michael's parents, grandparents lived. And yeah, when I would spend the night at my grandpa's and my grandma's, the cooking, the smells, they would take us to a place called Farmer's Market, which I also mentioned in the story, that had all the fun foods. And yes, they would buy me pizzas and hamburgers, and there was a special taffy machine that they had at Farmer's Market. And after we'd eat, we would go to the taffy machine, which was always the treat for all of us. So all of that was autobiographical. In fact, mentioning the rabbi, I will also tell you as a side note, the rabbi in my story is his name is Rabbi Michael Feynman. That was an homage to someone that was a friend of mine in grade school, and I had not seen him in many years. But it turns out he wound up becoming a very successful rabbi and was on the board of the rabbinical boards in different parts of the country. And he, as I found out 2, 3 years ago, he wound up passing away, which was very sad. He's my age. His name was Morley Feinstein. And so I wound up, as an homage to Morley, as an honor to Morley, I took the initials MF
Mhm.
and used them for my rabbi in the story, whose name is Michael Feynman.
He is a wonderful character, and I want to read something if you let me. And
Oh,
we're
please.
we're in the graveyard, and this is Michael in the graveyard. He has said he's visited with his grandparents in the graveyard and said goodbye to them. I'm just going to read this passage. Many of the gravestones contain photos of the deceased, putting a face to the vital, meaningful, flesh and blood histories buried underneath. He felt a sense of wonder, even awe, recognizing that each of these many thousands of burial sites represented lives that experienced what we all do, the connective tissue of tales and time, love and heartbreak, joy and sorrow, successes and failures, laughter and tears. I get goosebumps reading that. It is such a beautiful, again, homage to this place and the idea of the headstones. I don't know that I've ever seen a headstone with a photo on it, with a picture on it. And so I want to ask you now, I mean, what have we lost? I mean, I yeah, I don't plan to be buried. I don't plan to have a headstone. Um, is that a mistake? Should I change my mind?
It's your decision, Laurel. It's your decision. But I will tell you, by the way, thank you very much for reading that. And I'm touched that that passage of the book is something you want to read. Thank you. Um, Evergreen Cemetery, I should let everyone know this. Evergreen Cemetery is the largest non-denominational cemetery in the country. And it's, like I said earlier, it's located in a suburb of Los Angeles called Boyle Heights. Um, Turns out that I wound up driving to that cemetery one day, knowing that I was going to be writing the story, and I had to get familiar with this cemetery, which I originally found through research and a 3-part PBS series that I saw on the internet, which was fantastic. So Evergreen Cemetery, I walked. It's almost 70 acres, and I walked much of the cemetery, and it has over 300,000 grave sites, and I would say most of them have photos. And you're talking about photos that will date back as far as photos exist. You know, some of those graves, it was originally built in the late 1800s. So a lot of those gravestones have old photos and famous. Yes, and there's people that there's actors, mayors of Los Angeles, um, Ralph's Supermarket. I don't know if they have them in Colorado, but Ralph's Market is huge here in Los Angeles. George Ralph's is buried there. There's a couple of main streets in Los Angeles, Van Nuys and Lankershim. They worked together, by the way, and they also helped forge the 405 San Diego Freeway. So there's a lot of research that I did and things that I found out about it. Photos everywhere of all these on these gravestones. And again, there's very sad ones where you see little babies with their photos. And so, yeah, so yes, Laurel, the answer is there's photos, so many photos that I would look at, and they're all, you know, what you just read, it's every photo is a history. They all lived their lives, and there is that connective tissue.
Yeah.
They went through everything that everyone goes through in their lifetime in their own particular lives. And I just find that to be a fascinating concept. And there's nothing, it can't be denied.
Yeah. Yeah. You're making me think, Keith. You're making me think about things.
Is that good or
So
bad, Laurel?
it's all good. It's all good. You
That
make my
good.
brain hurt. It's all good. Talk to me about blindness and Braille. You've done a lot of research about Braille, and that whole idea of the marbles and messages. I'm not going to say anymore, but how did that come in? How did you figure that out?
When I was starting the story, I was trying to figure out what kind of characters do I want. And originally, I decided that I wanted to have someone with a handicap. At first, it was going to be an old Jewish man who had fought in the war. And that turned out not to be right. Then it was going to be a kid. Then there is a child, as you know, there's a
Yeah.
child, his name in the story. And I was going to make it him. But there were difficulties associated with that, especially school. I didn't know really how to handle that. Well, it turns out that was for the better, because I think the person that I wound up giving this handicap to, which was call her a co-star of the story, that led to what I was going to do to make, without giving anything away here, to make supernatural things start occurring that do involve the marbles. And that's as much as I'll say for now. And as regarding research into blindness and Braille, absolutely. Absolutely. you know, when as a writer, you don't want to just write because you think this is the way it is. Do your research and find out the way it is, so that when you write a story, you're making it as believable and credible as possible. You know, and as far as how to how to write Braille from A to Z, oh, that wasn't hard. You just go on the internet, you do a printout of Braille letters A to Z, and I had it always by my side in writing the story, so that when I needed to know how to write certain letters, I would know exactly how many black and how many white were needed for each letter.
That was fascinating. It made me think that you had maybe someone in your family who knew it and you learned it that way. It was very, very believable. So, and again, fascinating. It makes me want to learn it. I mean, we take our eyesight for granted, don't we?
Unfortunately, yeah. We
Mm,
take a lot of things for granted.
we do. We do. Talk about the lullaby at the end.
Yeah.
There's your music coming
Yeah.
through.
Um, I looked up when I knew I needed a lullaby. There was a scene again. I'm not giving anything
Mhm,
away, but there's a scene early in the book where this particular Roma woman needs to help the mother of the crying Petra go to
mhm,
sleep
mhm.
because I need to have an important talk. And this Roma woman winds up singing a lullaby to baby Petra. And this was fun for me because I wound up researching Romanian lullabies. And this is important because this was taking place in 1920. So I wanted to make sure that whatever lullaby I chose was a lullaby that did exist back in those days. And I did
Right.
find one that goes generations before 1920. And again, I went on the internet. It's, you can find anything on YouTube, which is
Yeah.
fantastic because I wound up actually hearing, there were two choices. I had two lullabies that I could choose from, and they're just beautiful. They're just beautiful melodies and they're inspiring. And so I wound up using one of those two. And this is again, the lullaby plays an important part in the story, and that's as much as I'll say for now.
Oh, it does. It absolutely does. And again, what a way to use music. Fascinating. So this is a supernatural book. You love writing about the supernatural. I'm going to caveat this question by saying no judgment at all. And I've had some really weird things happen in my life that I cannot explain. So I guess the question is, do you believe in the supernatural? And have you had any experiences with supernatural things that you would admit to?
So, the fact I've written three books, there's some supernatural work for you right there. Yeah, who would have thunk, you know? Um, I personally no, but um, I do believe that there have been way too many stories from credible, sane people that have talked about, let's call them ghostly experiences. Way too many for me to say they're all nuts. They're all crazy. No way. So I do believe that there is some kind of afterlife that exists. How many do we all have the capability? That goes beyond my pay grade, as they say. Or I can't, I don't know. But yes, the answer is yes. I do believe that there is an afterlife of some sort. Maybe it works in different ways. Maybe there are those that are ghosts. Maybe there are those that turn into dragonflies or hummingbirds um, or just that turn into a nice fruit tree. I don't know. But yeah, the answer is yeah, I do believe in it in up to a sense. Up to a sense, yes.
I want to talk about up to a sense. We're we're limited by our senses, right? We're limited in what we know by our senses, what we can see and hear and feel and touch. And I mean, we didn't know that atoms existed until we could see them with a certain microscope. Um, so yeah, I just think there's so much we don't know, and that's exciting.
Of course, it's exciting. Sure. I mean, the birth of the universe. We keep discovering more things about it. We're getting closer and closer. Will I live to see the day where they really specifically say this is how it happened and when it happened? I don't know. Probably not. But there will come a point where if mankind can survive long enough to find that time,
Yeah,
if we all can do each other a favor and continue to live on this planet, yeah, then one day, I think there's a lot more to discover.
yeah, I hope so. Keith, how have you changed? Have you changed as an author have you evolved since your first novel to where you are now?
My first novel was written because, yeah, there has been an evolution. And it's the first novel was written because it was something I worked in a lot of gang affiliated neighborhoods. And I was not a happy camper at work. I just didn't really like what I was doing, but I had to do it. So when I started writing, I was going through an emotionally tough time, and that was my reason for writing that book because it was my therapy. So that was that. Um, and I took a couple of creative writing classes and went through a number of versions of the book, The Poe Consequence.
Mhm.
And you just, like anything else, the more you do it, you wind up getting better at it if you just really stay committed. And when I wrote You Say Goodbye, which is my second book, I read the story by Alexandra Scott, and I had been searching for not only to write a second book, but the reason for writing a second book, because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it again. Um, and again, I felt as I was writing it, like you said earlier in the interview, I was only working on it on Sundays. And I look back on it now and saying, well, I must have improved as an author because I couldn't have pulled that off had I just been working 1 day a week on it without having learned more about writing and writing a book. This one, In Lieu of Flowers, I feel is as far as a qualitative book, I am most proud of the quality of the writing in here. Because I believe I took on subject matters that were the most challenging as far as we mentioned some earlier. You know, when we're talking about spiritual stuff, talking about research for blindness, talking about research in Romania and Bucharest in 1920. This I don't think would have been possible for me had I started to write this book first. I didn't realize how much needed to go into writing a story back then, even though I
Mhm.
discovered as I was writing it, because that so many hours were put into it and research
Yeah.
was put into it, but I didn't know it at the time. Now, when I wrote this book, I knew what I was taking on and I accepted the challenge. So I do believe I've grown as an author. Yes, for sure.
I know you have. And again, I've been working on a novel I'm working on now. I started it over 3 years ago. It'll be my best. I know it'll be my best. Someday I'll interview myself about it, but I hope to finish it this year. Anyway, advice to people who have stories in them?
Again, this is coming from someone that doesn't want to preach, someone that is not coming across as someone that knows it all. So I definitely want to preface what I'm about to say with that. Please understand that.
Don't be so modest.
But yeah, I do have advice. First of all, so many people I know want to write a story. They start a story, but they don't finish it. Um, I will go back to a line that my creative writing teacher told me in my first class. She said, you need to pack enough provisions to make the journey through the desert. It's a long trek from the first page to the last. And so the middle part often is seen as the hardest because you have an idea of what you want to write. You'll start off, you'll run the race and you're going full speed, and all of a sudden you run into a roadblock. Well, you better expect to run into a roadblock, more than one roadblock, many roadblocks. And even then, when you make it through that roadblock, guess what? There's another roadblock waiting for you. This is all part of the writing process. Be patient. Be patient with yourself. All right. I've been creative writing, Laurel. One thing that kind of helped me understand what it's going to be like to write a novel is because I've been creative writing for over 50 years. I started writing poetry when I was a sophomore in high school. And even then, you write something that you think is just right. Oh yeah, I got it now. I got it now. And you come back 15 minutes later. Well, guess what? You don't have it right now. It's the right brain, left brain thing. You know, it's the judgmental, it's the creative. So you better understand that editing is involved, self-editing. Be critical of yourself. But finally, when you realize after a day or two or three of reading the same thing and you don't want any changes, you really feel you nailed it, well, you probably nailed it. So that is my advice, is be patient. But if you have a passion for something and you have a story to tell it. I would also say that I've had friends that, for example, had dysfunctional family lives, and they really wanted to write about it. But they were afraid to write about it. They're afraid to expose things.
Mhm.
Well, what you do? You know what the solution to that is? You write a fictional story about those characters that were in real life. And no one will know. No one will know the difference, but you will. And then if you write a successful book, you've said it and you've expressed yourself, and whatever it happens to be, happiness, anger, laughter, distress, depression, whatever it is that led you to want to write about your family or friends or whoever it happens to be, you did it. But you didn't use the real names and you didn't even use the real environments either. No one will know, but do it. There's my advice.
Just do it.
Just do.
Absolutely. That is great advice. Keith Steinbaum, author of In Lieu of Flowers, in several other books. Are you working on another book now?
I have the birth of an idea, and hopefully down the road, Laurel, we'll be talking about it with another interview. For the moment, it involves a tree. That's as much as
Oh,
I'll say. It
I
involves a
love
tree.
trees.
You
I
love
love
trees?
trees.
Okay.
The Giving Tree still makes me cry when I read it.
Mm. Yeah. Well, yeah. Well, it's a good object to write about. Yeah, because
It
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 sure
can lead
is.
you so many ways.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Keith, where can people find your work or more about you?
Uh, my website is keithsteinbaum.com. As far as my books, all the usual sites. You got Amazon, Apple Books, Barnes and Noble, Kobo. Um, or you can just Google my name and you'll find me. I'm easy to find.
You
And
are.
if for anyone that ever wants to write to me, I love communicating with people that have sent me messages and questions or comments. I think that's one of the real thrills of doing what I've done
Your
is
email?
learning.
Your email?
Email is Keith, Keith, Keith at keithsteinbaum.com.
Right.
And it's
Right.
just, but I've met great people that I normally would never have met through my writing. And it's one of the real thrills of doing what I do.
It is. It is hearing from fans. That's why. Well, that's not totally why we write, but it's a bonus to why
It's a
we write.
bonus.
It
It's
is.
absolutely a bonus. Yes, it is.
Keith Steinbaum, this has been another delightful visit. I'm excited that you're still writing. Listeners out there, write to Keith, read his books, all three of them, and write to him. Tell him what you think, and you can find links and send me a few more photos, Keith. You can find links and photos and with my show notes on my website at leadvillelaurel.com. And yeah, get that tree book written, and we'll talk again.
Thank you so much. Well, this has been a pleasure. I appreciate it. And good luck to you
Always.
in your career too. Good luck to you.
Thank you, Keith. We'll stay in touch.
Very good. I hope so. Thank you.
Bye.